Welcome to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I am Tammi Mack on Foxsoul. As protests against police brutality and racial inequalities continue to take place in the wake of George Floyd's death, there have been growing calls to defund the police. The term defund has become controversial, and some have used reimagine police policies. The challenge is the direction of either of those statements and their meanings. How would defunding or reimagining the police actually look? And is this the answer to America's, or more specifically, Black America's angst and injustice? Let's get down to business, y'all. It's the business of being Black. Today is police justice. Please welcome retired NYPD Deputy Inspector Corey Pegues. Hi, Corey.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. 30-year law enforcement veteran and Los Angeles County Sheriff candidate, Eric Strong. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Tammi. How are you today?
Great. Frontline activist and motivational speaker, Questions with Cree. Hi, Questions with Cree.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Pastor of McCarthy Memorial Church, Pastor Eddie Anderson. Hi, Pastor.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And the founder of Clergy for Black Lives Matter, Reverend Dr. James Thomas. Hi, Reverend Dr. Thomas.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Let's get right into it, because this show is titled Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. And so Tammi Mack wants to know, why should Black people care about defunding, reimagining, or anything else in regards to the police? What a loaded question here. So let's move to kick things off with Questions with Cree. Why should Black people care?
I know that Black people should care, because if we don't care, who else will? If we stop caring and we stop protesting and we stop speaking up for what we feel is right, because it's not even what we know, it's what we feel, because every day we wake up, we feel unprotected, we feel unsafe, we feel like society just doesn't see us, and we have to be 10 times better to get recognized. Like, that's a feeling, and we've grown accustomed to it. So if we stop caring, the world is gonna stop caring, because every day we wake up, we feel that the world doesn't care.
I think those feelings have been embroidered with our experiences, which make them equal to facts. But go ahead, Corey. Right. Why should Black people care? Yes.
Black people should care because usually the low socioeconomic areas in the Black and brown communities, that's where the police are. You know, I coined the phrase a long time ago: in the Black and brown communities, the police hunt, and in white communities, they protect and serve. So we must care. We must care about defunding, restructuring, reimagining. All of those words, you know, they don't really have too much meaning to me. I'm more, prone to think about, like, hey, what are we going to do to really affect change? Because the defund, I don't even like defund, because most people look at defund and think abolish, which we don't want, because when you defund or abolish the police, who's going to be affected? The Black and brown community. And we don't want that. We want some positive police. I don't care if they green, yellow, or pink. We just want cops to come in our community and treat us with respect.
Eric, why should Black people care about defunding or reimagining the police?
It's important to care because we are the community that is the most impacted by law enforcement. This is not only a decade-long problem, it's a generational problem. And I think if we do not pay attention, we are going to continue to go down a very bad road. And I think that it is the outcry from a lot of our communities that has made some of the changes that is coming about. And it's important to care because, for so long we didn't have a voice. Now we do have a voice, but we need to use it and put it towards something positive. I like the term reallocating rather than defunding. And I truly believe that we can take some of these budgets and put them towards some of the resources and services that are going to create sustainable solutions, because we're not finding our answers in a jail cell, and we're not finding our answers in a revolving door of recidivism. So I think
that's an interesting comment that we're going to circle back to, because we haven't really, as America, the nation, hasn't really found the answer in jail or many of the things that we've considered consequences of interacting with the police. Pastor Reverend Anderson, please, why should Black people care?
I think Black people should care, Tammi, because Black in America has been synonymous with criminal. And so when we say defund the police, we're saying decriminalize Blackness. right? We want to make sure that we have dignity in our streets and in our livelihoods and our everyday experiences. And so Black people should care because your everyday existence is on the line.
Decriminalize Black people. Wow. That's a big one. You can't argue with that, can you? Like, is there a debate to decriminalize Black people? That can't possibly be a debate, right? I say we use that one.
That is exactly a debate, Tammy, because that's what critical race theory is about. Unlike what
you're right. But before we get there, Reverend Dr. James, why should Black people care?
Well, I think Black people should care because we need to be about transforming the harms that have been done to our community by state-sanctioned violence. And so at the end of the day, we need to challenge all of humanity to be more humane. And again, while I do support defunding the police, the ultimate goal, in my opinion, is to absolutely abolish them in the same way that we did the institution of enslavement. We did not seek to reform it. We did not seek to reallocate the funds, as has been said, and I think that's a great start. But at the end of the day, the motto of the Sheriff's Department is serving the community since 1865. Well, what else happened in 1865? The slave patrols. That's when they began. The Fugitive Slave Law was passed in 1865. And so as long as policing is connected to that, as long as that pariah exists, it needs to be eliminated. It needs to absolutely be defunded. But more importantly, we need to abolish it and reimagine what public safety looks like, not policing, but what public safety looks like. And we know how to solve this problem. It's called good paying jobs. There is a direct correlation between good paying jobs and crime. We know this. And so a lot of the money being allocated, 51%, at least in the city of Los Angeles, to take care of the police who still don't keep us safe. And so my thought is that we must defund, absolutely defund, but we also have to move in the direction of what does public safety look like? What does community safety look like? And I don't think it looks like police patrolling up and down our streets.
Eric, so Reverend Doctor says that there is and will always be a connection to slavery when it comes to the police. But there are Hispanic police, there are Asian police, there are Black police, Eric. So are Black police officers following that connection from 1865?
No, I don't believe all of us are. I mean, there's a lot of good ones. I couldn't imagine what policing would be like if it wasn't for Black police officers in the ranks right now. I think it would be 10 times worse. I do, agree to the point with Mr. Thomas where he's talking about the history of it, but I don't know if abolishing it is going to be the answer because we do have to have something in place to provide safety and public safety. But yeah, I mean, we have to look at the history of it. We have to look at the entire system. Law enforcement is easy because we have on the uniforms and we drive the black and whites. But there's a whole criminal justice system that has participated in this, from district attorney's office, even public defender's office, and our judges.
Yeah, I agree. Corey, please talk about the connection to slavery when it comes to the police officers. Do you really think that Black police officers are hunting down Black people?
Oh, most definitely. I worked in the biggest police department in the country, the NYPD. I was the executive, one of the top executives. I could promise you there's two different forms of policing in Black and brown communities and white communities. I'm not against, so let me just really put this, I'm not for defunding the police. I'm for refunding the community. There's a lot of stuff we can do to refund the community. Like we've been doing the war on drugs since the Reagan era. You can't lock your way up out of addiction. The only way you can fix an addiction is 3 ways: counseling, treatment, and education. So the billions of dollars we're using on the war on drugs, we can put that into treatment, counseling, and education. Mental health. Every time we send a cop to these emotionally disturbed people, these jobs with people with mental health, they're killing them because cops are trained to kill. That's what they do. They don't know no jujitsu or no boxing. Their only last resort is their gun. We need to start looking at, like, Oregon has this program called Cahoots, where somebody's a mental health call comes, they send mental health professionals. So that's another couple of $1 billion. So, Rev, we don't need to abolish. we need to refund our community to help our community, because let's just be really serious here. I mean, the gangs are out of control. Crime is out of control. Eric could tell you all over the country. This is not an anomaly. Crime is up. Oh, so when we abolish it, because all about abolitionists, I'm on all these shows saying, well, what's your alternative? They can't really tell me, because one alternative we need is somebody that's going to get these criminals off our streets. These Bloods, Crips, Nietas, MS-13s. They're real.
And when you say abolish, the first thing I think is I can run in the store and steal a whole bunch of stuff without consequences. But Reverend Anderson, please talk about it.
Yeah, but I think this conversation is interesting because I haven't heard anyone actually say that they are fully disagreeing with defund the police, right? And that's all we've said when we was on the street. When we say abolish, right? When you abolish something, we abolished, when Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman abolished slavery, they said put something back in its place that actually gives us dignity and allows us to participate fully in society. America didn't do that. We saw that with Black codes and Jim Crow laws and everything else. So when we're saying abolish the police, when we're saying defund the police, we're saying that we are going to put something new in its place so we can reimagine what public safety looks like. And so to what my brother Corey is saying over here, yeah, absolutely. We're saying we want mental health workers to show up if someone has a mental health break in our society. We know that in LA, when people have homelessness issues, experiencing homelessness, it's mental health related, and we send the police. They ain't social workers. Why don't we send somebody who's a mental health worker? That's what we're saying. When we're saying abolish, we mean eradicate the system and its vestiges of slavery.
Let's take a quick break on that. We'll be back. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack, and the business of being Black today is police justice. Please welcome retired NYPD Deputy Inspector Corey Pease, 30-year law enforcement veteran and Los Angeles County Sheriff candidate Eric Strong, frontline activist and motivational speaker, Questions with Cree, pastor of McCarthy Memorial Church, Pastor Eddie Anderson, and the founder of Clergy for Black Lives Matter, Reverend Dr. James Thomas. I know I said police justice, but that's kind of what I call it. But several people call it defunding the police. We've had reallocate said on this panel today. We've had abolish said on this panel today, and reimagining on this panel today. But what does it mean to defund the police, and what would that look like? Because it means different things to different people. Some people believe departments should be completely abolished, and some police roles could be better performed unarmed non-law enforcement personnel, and then slashing budgets to shrink the footprint of the police is another thing. I say deconstruct the mind of a police officer, but whatever you say. Questions with Cree, I want to know, what does it mean to defund the police for you?
For me personally, it definitely feels, or I know that it is, I would say reallocating, but reallocating and flushing some of that money into the community, flushing it into getting police therapy, because they do see a lot of things. They do see things that most people don't. And so how can you respectively send someone who is traumatized, or who has drinking problems, or who has never talked to anybody about what they've gone through, or what they've seen, to release some of that tension, so when they can go to a situation to de-escalate it, they have the proper tools to do so. I personally think that they should be responsible for what they do. So for instance, they should pay into a security program. So if something were to happen, now the police is held liable, because the city of Atlanta does not hold their police officers liable. Coming from someone who was actually assaulted by a police officer, someone spoke on the panel earlier about getting the criminals off the street. Well, that's a criminal and he's still on the street because of the laws that are put in place to protect the police officers. So if there is an insurance policy that they pay into, once you assault someone and you change their life forever and they're now traumatized beyond measure, you have to pay for that. You can no longer be a police officer. You can no longer serve and quote unquote protect. So defunding the police is more than just taking the money from them. It's putting that money into people like me, who didn't have any resources to get the help that I needed after someone that I called to serve and protect did the absolute opposite.
Eric, I'll let you respond to that, because a lot of people who want the police defunded they also ask for consequences when it comes to the police. There are absolutely no consequences that police officers face.
Right.
First of all, I'll say to Questions with Cree, I apologize for whatever experience that you had with law enforcement that gave you that trauma. And I think that's where it starts. We need to take ownership of where we are as law enforcement and basically recognize with a look in the mirror of what we have done to create this world of distrust and a lack of communication. And it starts with number one, saying, you know what, I apologize to you and to those others, because we haven't been doing it right all along. When we talk about reallocating funds, I think it was Corey that said it. We need to replace those, and Reverend Anderson, we need to replace those with true resources. I remember back in the 90s, in the early 90s, I used to be able to call social services when I came across a non-criminal family incident. And you know what they tell me? Hey, we'll be there in 30 or 45 minutes. And then they would show up and we would hand it off. Remember back in the 90s, being able to go to a mental health call and being able to go to drop the people off. Those resources have disappeared for us. We are now the only ones answering the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning on Christmas Eve. We're the only 365 24/7. So I think that's how we got to this place where we're handling all these calls. But in terms of accountability, you're absolutely right. If a police officer, sheriff deputy does something wrong, does something illegal, does something immoral, criminal, they should be held accountable. And if we do that, then that is how we're going to start fixing things. Right now, the national standard on lethal force is I could. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it basically comes down to I can say I feared for my life. It's not a standard of I absolutely had to, it was absolutely necessary, there was no other option. So accountability is huge. But again, I'm going to keep saying this, that goes to our criminal justice system with our district attorney's offices and our judges and so forth, as well as the policies internally within law enforcement.
I believe that, but I have to kind of back up what the Reverend Dr. James said earlier. Listen, it all started in 1865 after the slaves were free and slaves became fugitives. They weren't allowed to loiter or they would go to jail. Well, if you're a slave and you're set free, where the hell you gonna go? So it brings you right back into the trappings of slavery. And it also, I have to say, I'm not sure if it was Corey or Reverend Anderson that said it. It criminalized Black people. It criminalized Black people for wanting to be free. That's what slavery did. That's what freeing the slaves did. And police ended up becoming the gatekeeper for those freed slaves. So how do we reverse all of that mentally when it comes to the police, Reverend Dr. James?
Glad you bring that up. And I think there's one thing that Brother Eric is saying. I think it does involve the criminal justice system as well. But I think what we've been able to do well is we have been able to deal with the letter of the law, but we have never dealt with the spirit of the law. And the reality is
the spirit of the law.
The spirit of the law. Because the spirit of the law is the intent of the law. And when we talk against policing, we're talking about not the letter of policing. We're talking about the spirit behind policing. Now I'm a pastor, and but at the end of the day, it's like this. What you're talking about is qualified immunity. Police have qualified immunity. If you look at, I juxtapose qualified immunity and the Casual Killing Act of, I think, 1807, the exact same thing. You can correct an enslaved African, and kill them as long as they're not doing what you have asked them to do and you do not suffer a felony. It is as if, this is the law in 1807, it is as if you never did anything. And this is what happens with policing. They can kill us. If you substitute police in where they have slave master and black man or brown man where they have enslaved in the Casual Killing Act, you get what is happening with our folks today. In 1971, the Supreme Court had an opportunity to decide that the chokehold was unconstitutional. And what happened is that they decided that they could not prove that it would happen to this same man the same way. That's one of the test for constitutionality. In reality, if you're a Black man, then it is very likely, or a brown man, that it's very likely that you could experience a chokehold. And so if we would have outlawed and made it unconstitutional in 1971, Eric Gardner would still be alive. So many others would still be alive. And so at the end of the day, how many people have to die before we come to the conclusion that this institution and this system, which is only the strong arm of white supremacy, they're the muscle behind white supremacy. As soon as we accept—
I want to make one correction there. It's not how many people have to die. It's how many white people have to die, because clearly Black people have died and nothing has been done. But okay, questions. I want to go to Corey here. Corey, are there any U.S. cities or states that have defunded their police departments? And what has been the outcome of this being put in place?
There haven't been any that have defunded, but let me tell you, first, let me correct the Reverend. You know, I was in NYPD. NYPD had on the book since the 90s that it's illegal to do a chokehold, and Eric Garner still was killed by Pantaleo. So just so you know, if it was Supreme Court, we already had that on the books. He still was killed and nobody got charged with the crime. Let's look at, if you look at in New Jersey, there was a town in New Jersey that just reimagined their entire police department. What they did was, I don't know if this is—
Hold that thought on what they did, and we'll tell you when we come back on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Find out what they did, y'all, because we all waiting to find out. We'll be back on Business of Being Black. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack, and the Business of Being Black today is defunding the police. So Corey, we were talking about, are there any other cities or states that have in fact defunded the police? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, you know, they tried to do it in Seattle. They definitely tried to do it in Seattle. And they actually put it on a referendum for the people to vote the last cycle, and the people voted to keep the police department intact. But in Camden, one of the best, I guess, reimagining police departments in the country is Camden, New Jersey. So what happened a few years ago in Camden, Camden was like the most violent city in America in like the 80s and early 90s. What they did was fired every single cop and had them reapply for the job. There was no, there was no window where there was no police. They kept a few just to keep the cars running, but everybody had to reapply. Half of them didn't even get their jobs back because they looked at their records. They saw that they was racially profiling. They had all these complaints. They was involved in shootings. And now Camden, New Jersey actually has been featured on, CNN and, New York Times, all of these publications. It's one of the prototype police departments. So that's something that people can look at too.
Why wouldn't someone follow a prototype that seemed to be working?
Because Eric said it a little earlier. There's no national standards in policing, but I'll let Eric expound on that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to know that every department has different set of policies. We have national standards in terms of precedent and case law. For example, we could say that traffic stops are inherently dangerous, right? So therefore, we can get people out of the car, we can detain them. However, from station to station and agency to agency, we know that if you pull over a white guy in our Malibu area and driving a Mercedes, we're not going to get him out the car and set him on the curb. However, if we pull him over in Compton, a black guy, we're going to get him out the car and probably put him in the backseat of the police car, and we're going to say it's for our safety. My issue is this: if it's the traffic stop that's inherently dangerous, which is a federal decree, which is a federal precedent, then why doesn't it happen to everybody, or why does it not happen to anybody? We shouldn't, in other words, we have to police in different areas the same way. We can't use a socioeconomic or a racial base to determine how we're policing. That's where there's no national standard. That's where there's really not even a state standard.
Minneapolis City Council took steps to allow for abolishing the police department and replacing it with something else. But how would you define the role of police departments? Reverend Eddie, I think you began to talk about this a little earlier in the show.
Yeah, I mean, I think within the movement, the whole system is guilty. So you got to get rid of, so we're saying defund the police and abolish it. I mean, right now, I think the only thing we really need police for, and hopefully we don't need them for this much longer, is if someone gets shot, it is an active shooting situation. I mean, we got to figure out a system to replace that. But majority of things that police officers are doing across the country, we don't actually need police officers to do. Traffic stops. If someone got a broken tail light, we don't need a police officer to come pull them over and then shoot a black man because of you fearing for your life. His tail light is broken. Why don't we fix his tail light? Get a Department of Transportation to actually invest some money to fix the tail light. If your mama is having a problem at the house with some kids, send a social worker out or have some community people come into the neighborhood and take care of that. We got gang violence in our neighborhoods. We need intervention workers. We know right now that I live in Los Angeles, where I pastor at, right? That crime is up. That's all across the country. That homicides are up. We know that's across the country. We also know that 50% of the homicides are unsolved cases, and majority of those fall in black neighborhoods. So police can't solve the case, but we know that I've heard stories of mothers who tell me that, oh, we know who killed our son. We know if something got lost in our community, where to go and get it. And there are people in the community or intervention workers that can go and do that work if they are financed and resourced in a proper way. And so I think what we have to really do is have some moral imagination around what we want in place of it, and to think about how we do not lock up our own. Right, that's what we're doing in the Black community. We're being tools of white supremacy and locking up our own by continuing this system of policing. And so I think get rid of policing as we know it, right? It's not helpful. When I see that badge, trauma automatically is there. Slave catching comes up. You're going to give me whatever.
I don't think you have to go as far back as slavery, because Questions with Cree said it's trauma anytime it hits her. What do you think about community policing, Questions with Cree? Could it help end police violence?
To an extent, I definitely feel like if you have people that are leading by example, after some time, definitely people will follow suit. But going with what you said, it's trauma every single time. Every single time I see blue lights, every single time I see an officer. Even with Eric, I appreciate your apology, but that was traumatizing, you even apologizing, because I'm just like, why are you saying sorry? Oh, because somebody didn't do their job when they were supposed to. So it's a constant thought of why I feel the way I feel as a Black woman in my own community in a Black city right here in Atlanta, assaulted by a Black police officer. So he wasn't white, he was Black. So that plays along the lines of what Pastor said as well. You have people that look like us that are locking us up, that are making us suffer from trauma. So I feel like if there was a community member that came and said, or play mediator, you know what I'm saying? Granted, it was late at night. It was about like 10:30 at night, and it was just the officer and I. But if someone had intervened and stepped in, I definitely feel like that situation could have been avoided. Now, granted, it could have escalated, but there could have been more evidence to support, you know, what actually happened to me at that time.
Yeah, but a mediator sounds good, but I wonder if there were mediators, would they err on the side of the police as opposed to on the side of the people, or being just, being open to the actual event in the way that it happens? Would they be that way? If police budgets are cut, how should those funds be reallocated? In 2019, state and local governments spent $120 billion on police, which is 4% of state and local direct general expenditures. Individual cities or counties may allocate more funds to police departments, but how should those funds be allocated, Eric?
I think we have to really look at the overall picture of what services are needed in every individual community. And to what Pastor Anderson said, and even Cree, look, we're not going to start the healing process. How do you start the healing process with any relationship is through dialogue and communication. It's not going to happen overnight. We have to get out there, take ownership. We have to apologize for what we've done. But with that, we also have to give the services that people deserve, are needed. And I don't know if, stopping traffic, stopping traffic enforcement, because it's not about a broken taillight. It's about the person also driving 100 miles an hour on a surface street that crashes into a family and kills 4 people instantly. So those are the things that we're looking at, and we need to realize. So do we put services into traffic control? Do we put resources into mental health? Yes, absolutely. But again, here's the problem. When you look at LA County, over 4,000 square miles, and we have maybe 6 to 8 mental health teams out in the county on any given night. When I'm out on the street at 2 o'clock in the morning and somebody's in a mental health crisis and I call for that mental health team and they say they're 45 minutes away or they're in the north part of county in Palmdale, I can't tell the person with a mental health crisis, hey, time out, put your mental health crisis on timeout. It's going to take 2 hours to get there. We need resources now. And that's what people have to understand, that the state, county, local municipalities have to put resources in there where people can respond. Mental health crisis does not happen Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We need people on the weekends. We need addiction services. We need social services. We need health services. And that's why I'm the only candidate that has said no to building a new jail. I want to build beds that are going to give these sustainable services. But I think it's so hard.
So if you could reallocate funds, you would reallocate funds to mental health services and things of that nature. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Listen, Tammy, if you can take it off of our plate so that we don't have to respond, guess what? There's data there that will show how much money we're saving, and we can give that money to those resources. In other words, if we don't have to respond and put manpower and energy and woman power into taking care of these issues for society, then absolutely, take that money from us and put it to where it's going to be beneficial.
Well, you would have to be the only candidate that
hold that thought, Reverend Dr. James. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back on Business of Being Black on Foxsoul. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. And Dr. Reverend James, you were responding to Eric?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear, because he sounds like a defund candidate. Maybe I shouldn't label him with that, because then that probably will limit his chances. But
yeah, you're trying to get him not voted for.
Right. And that's half of the problem. What I was going to say is I was going to say two things. Number one, white supremacy takes no prisoners. So once you enter into a white supremacist system, you must bow at the altar of white supremacy. And so whether you're black, white, blue, or purple, whatever your political beliefs may be, ultimately they're going to run head on into white supremacy, and you're going to have to make a decision. The other thing that I wanted to say is that there are examples of defunding and reallocating right here in Los Angeles. The Los Angeles Unified School District, the students in Students Deserve, they organized and they got the police removed off campus. The money that was saved went into funding the Black Excellence Program. And so now there is a program specifically in LAUSD with laser focus on making sure that Black students achieve. There's a talk of something similar to that at all of the Cal States. The students at Cal State LA and other Cal States and universities across the country want the police off their campus. One of the things that they're saying is, and I know in the example of Cal State, during the pandemic, there were nobody on campus, but the police budget remained at $5 million. So it doesn't make any sense. And yet we have students who cannot graduate because they don't have the funds to do so. And so there are all kinds of ways. We think at the end of the day, a Yale study said that the police solve less than 2% of the crime. 50% of violent crimes never get reported. 11% end in arrest, and only 2% end in conviction. And so this whole notion, this whole narrative that the police stop crime, they don't. What the police do is that they monitor and they make sure that white supremacy remains in place and that Black folks remain in their place. That is what they do. And I'm never going to back up against that, because that is what I've seen. That has been my experience. That is what the data shows. It doesn't show if the police stop crime, as Brother Corey said, they occupy all of our communities. Our communities, the Black and brown communities, should be the safest communities in the nation, because they occupy those. They don't occupy places like Beverly Hills. They don't occupy wealthy white areas. They don't want them in there. And so at the end of the day, we are as much of we are just as humane as anybody else on the planet, and so we need to be treated as such, as Pastor Eddie.
So Corey, I want you to jump in on that one. Listen, there have to be police officers who are heroes, right? Like they have to stop some crime, they have to stop some violence, right? I mean, they take out their guns, they shoot, they have to kill the bad guy or get the bad guy at some point, right?
Yeah, so let's just be clear. Rev gave some very, very, very good statistics. My only issue with that is who wants to be on the end of the statistics where you're getting shot, where you're getting raped, robbed, and murdered? Who wants to be on that? Yeah, he hit it out the park. Police, and I keep telling people on all these shows until I'm blue, police don't solve a lot of crime. We solve it with the help of the community. That's how we solve the crime. You know, to be a great police commissioner or a great commander, you gotta master the 3 C's: cops, community, and crime. Not one of them, not 2 of them, but you gotta be able to master them all. If you can't master them all, you're not gonna be a great commander. But if you're not bridging that gap between the Black and brown community police, everybody's going to be getting shot. Everybody's going to be getting killed. Rev, you knocked it out the park. And I'm glad you said that on this national show. The police, I'm a former police commander. We got Eric there, sheriff. We'll tell you, police don't solve a lot of crimes. We get the crime with the collaboration of the community. And that's what policing has to do so much more, because this thing right here actually changed the game. One of these, the cell phone, it has changed the game. Y'all see it? Oh, remember,
I don't know how much.
Tammy, remember we were saying,
Corey, I don't know how much it's changed the game.
I'm gonna tell you this, Tammy, remember?
The consequences or the lack thereof remain the same when it comes to policing in America.
What I wanted to say is this, Tammy. Remember, we always screaming for body cameras, right?
Yeah.
Now cops got body cameras, and all we see is them shooting and killing people, right? We still see them killing people, but it's one piece of the pie. Eric can tell you, it's one piece of the pie. I'd rather the cops have a body camera where we can at least now see. We wouldn't know about George Floyd if we don't see that. We wouldn't know about Chandra Bland had a stupid tail light out, ended up getting killed. We wouldn't know Eric Garner. We wouldn't know Walter Scott. Obviously, I could say 100 different names, but if we don't have this video, it's just one piece of the pie. But the thing that you could never get rid of, the best part of policing is community involvement, and Eric could tell you that.
And all of those people who shot those videos, all of those people who shot those videos face some kind of criminality.
Eric, I want Eric to respond. Eric was getting ready to respond. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, but everybody brings up some very salient points. But here's the thing: it's like that image of the starfish, the millions of starfish on the beach, and somebody's throwing them in and say you'll never make a difference. Listen, I have stopped rapes in progress. I have stopped stabbings and robberies in progress. And that made a difference to those people. It had not been for a law enforcement officer, be it me or somebody else there, to do that. Like Corey said, I mean, everybody would just be running around getting shot. And I agree with you. Look, we have not done it right. We have not done what we're supposed to as law enforcement in a lot of ways, in a lot of areas. But here's the thing. Is it law enforcement, or is it the people that have been involved in it that have not done it right? And we can go back to the slave catcher mentality. I agree. But, unless you've been that person with the gun to your head and feeling like you've been about to lose your life, and somebody comes in and intervenes and stops that, maybe you won't have an appreciation. But I'm sorry. I mean, I have family members that have been victim of violent crime. I've seen people come to me and express gratitude and appreciation for helping them at the most vulnerable time in their life. So not all policing is bad. It does serve good, but we just need to get to a point where, our whole mindset shifts. Because like Corey just said, those cameras are exposing what we all on this Zoom right here have.
But nothing is changing. So that's why I'm saying the cameras are neither here nor there. Look, we all here in LA, we just basically went back through the uprisings that happened in Cali in 1992 in Los Angeles with Rodney King. We all saw the video. It mattered not. The uprising was because those men, those police officers, were not charged with anything. And we see this time and time again. And so I think that becomes more of a problem than defunding the police. It's the quality, the qualified immunity that Reverend James spoke of. I want to ask questions with Cree. Do you think, because you talked about earlier how it was a Black police officer that assaulted you, do you think if there were more Black police officers on the force, that it would help?
I'm sorry. All this talk about police is kind of getting me emotional. But
It's okay. It's okay. You can take your time. Take your time.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry because the police officer that assaulted me turned his camera off. And so it's like, okay, you have people that understand the law and you have people that can speak to the credibility and can speak to them changing people's lives for the better. But then you have someone like me, I just can't get past it, like no matter what. And I feel like I have met other Black officers and I told them what happened and they know, they're like, oh, you're the girl from the news. Oh, you're on the news. And there was nothing, like there was no support, there was no apology, there was nothing and so I genuinely don't know the answer to that question because I thought that I was safe. It was a traffic violation, pulled me over, arrested me, assaulted me with a weapon, deleted the evidence. I could go on of how many ways that he broke the law. And there's still to this day, 2 years later, there's been no consequence. There's been no consequence. He's been able to carry on with his life. And so I don't know if more Black people on the force would be okay because like one of the, I forget who said it, but once you step along that lines of white supremacy, that's who you are. That's who you are. You feel like you have to prove yourself. You feel like, oh, I'm gonna be a part of this particular organization. I gotta walk the walk, how they walk the walk, or they're gonna fire me, or I'm gonna lose my job, or I'm gonna lose my reputation. All on the lines, you're killing people and they're still walking around smiling, pretending that they're okay. But you've taken a piece of them because you're trying to follow that line of white supremacy. So
Let's take a break on that.
I don't know.
And sister, we got you.
Let's take a break on that. Let's go to break. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. Questions with Cree. I just want to say thank you for your bravery. I really hate that you had to revisit that episode with you and the police, but I do applaud you for your bravery and sharing the story and expressing your true feelings with us about that. And these are some of the stories that we need to know about, because when we sit up here on our high horses and say, well, every police officer should have a camera, and then we hear, well, this police officer turned his camera off, so it begins to question what exactly is the solution, because police officers, some are bad. And unfortunately, one of the comedians said as a joke, do we say some pilots are bad pilots? Do we still leave those pilots there if they're bad pilots, or do we get rid of them? They just had a plane and take off in the middle of the air. They found out he had no training and they had to turn the plane back around and land it. It was crazy. So the question is, do we continue to say, but there are some good, or do we make them all good? I know, Reverend Eddie, you wanted to talk about something that happened in LA. So go ahead.
Yeah, so in California, we passed the Kenneth Ross. Kenneth Ross was shot in Gardena. We passed the Kenneth Ross law because we realized in California, in the defund police movement, that barbers have to be licensed, doctors have to be licensed, but police don't. And so we passed a law where you could, suspend a license of police officers, that you can hold people accountable. We got unqualified immunity. We got to talk about police associations or protective leagues. And then we also got to talk about how do we hold people accountable for the actions that they do. When a question with Cree, I feel your pain. I'm from Atlanta originally. I know how they are down there, right? That they roughed me up to my prom night. I remember that. So, we got to have some kind of ability there. And I think that's what we're talking about, defunding police, eradicating the system, replacing it with something new.
Yeah. Eric, I know you had an example of getting rid of the police versus getting rid of bad doctors. So share that metaphor.
I think it's important to know that I'm sorry, I'm in law enforcement. My wife's in law enforcement. My dad was a police officer. I've been roughed up by LAPD. And the one thing that I did when I roughed up by LAPD is I looked and I said, those cops are bad. Why? Because I got to see my dad be silly and a lot of his friends, and I got to see the jokester and the real person. There are real people behind those uniforms, and that's what we need to realize. So I was using the example of, what happens in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago translates into all police across the country, it's same as LA. So when we look at doctors, when we look at any other profession, we could look at the Catholic priesthood, we could look at a whole bunch of things. But when we look at doctors who have done malicious, intentional things while people are under anesthesia, who have sexually violated and molested and been guilty of malpractice, nobody says all doctors, all dentists are bad. What we do is we hold that doctor and that dentist accountable. And I think that's what we need to do at law enforcement. Law enforcement needs to be held accountable. You know, when somebody does something, they violate the public trust, if they turn that camera off, that's an intentional act. It's a violation of the public trust. They should be fired. They shouldn't be doing it because you know what? They had the training, they had the information, they knew they shouldn't have turned it off to begin with. But I think, you know, we're such the example of oppression. People forget that there are real people behind those badges who suffer, who have dealt with things, but also who are out there trying to do good. And I'm not trying to salvage, I'm not trying to say that, you know, change your mind to law enforcement. I'm just saying,
yeah, because I don't think I don't think for 1 minute you'll get most Black people to feel sorry for the police and what they go through.
No, I don't want them to feel sorry.
So Eric, you are Lieutenant Strong. What is the mission behind your campaign? If you win, you will become the first Black elected official to become LA County Sheriff. We've had some issues in LA with our sheriffs. So how do you plan on making this right? Because it certainly sounds like you won't have the police department backing you if you're talking about accountability and consequences.
Well, in all honesty, somebody said it earlier. What do we need to change? I think it was Cree. We need to change the mindset in the culture of law enforcement. And that starts with dialogue. It starts with expectation. I could tell you right now that not once in my entire career had the messaging on the inside been treat people with respect, dignity, and compassion. And I acknowledge that in every forum that I go to. The message has been go take people to jail, go arrest people. People forget the sheriff has the largest jail system in the country. We're not doing a good job at that. So it starts from day one with accountability. It starts with day one with the change of the mindset that respect, dignity, and compassion have to be the cornerstones of every interaction.
Right, I'm going to move on to Corey. Tell us about Corey Pagee's enterprise and your book, Once a Cop, The Street, the Law, Two Worlds, One Man.
Thank you. Thank you for the plug. And that's my book, came out in 2016. When I was a teenager, I sold a bunch of drugs, carried guns, changed my life, becoming an executive in the top police department in the country. Along, got my bachelor's, my master's, went to Columbia University. I have a documentary out over my shoulder called A Cops and Robbers Story that hit movie theaters on March 14th. And you can catch it on streaming service such as Google, Apple TV, Vudu, Redbox.
Excellent. Any streaming service, we'll definitely catch that. Reverend Eddie.
One thing about the reason the police officer's job, Eric, is so important because it's the only profession in America where the citizens give you the right to take a life. If deadly physical force is being used against you or someone else imminently, that's why we can't be compared to doctors, lawyers, construction workers, so on and so forth.
Understood. Pastor Anderson, talk about your upcoming event, EC30, and your ministry, McCarthy Memorial Christian Church.
Yes, so our church is on the forefront of justice. We've been that way for 90 years. On Thursday, if you live in Los Angeles, come by the church at 6:30. We have Tavis Smiley here moderating a debate for the city attorney's office because we're talking about defunding the police. We're also talking about those attorneys that file those charges that protect law enforcement as well. So come on out here at 6:30. The address is 4101 West Adams Boulevard. McCarthy Memorial Christian Church. We're here for justice and for making sure the community knows what's going on.
Thank you. Questions with Cree is the name of the show. Talk about it. You're on mute, sis. I want to hear it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so essentially I teach people how to be cool and conscious. I was a radio personality for about 4 to 5 years, and I had a very cool job. And after being assaulted, as I shared with you all, it allowed me to be conscious. And so now I'm combining those two and teaching people how to be cool and how to be conscious and using their purpose to produce in their power. I'm setting up a tour right now. So as soon as I get all the dates solidified, you guys will know. Social media is at Questions with Cree. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me.
I love that. That's a radio show in itself.
Thank you.
I don't know why you got out. Get back in, girl. Reverend Dr. Thomas, clergy for Black Lives Matter.
Clergy for Black Lives Matter and pastor of Living Word Community Church and president of NAACP San Fernando Valley. We are having also on May 19th from 7 to 9 o'clock a candidates forum, 20440 Lassen in Chatsworth, California at the Congregational Church of Chatsworth. I just want to say to my sister that, you know, you need to know that the former chief of police for San Diego said that 2% of all officers are sexual predators. And so that's some important information for us to ponder. It's just like
we've got to go now, Reverend Doctor.
So God bless you, and let's be in touch. Let's get it together. We're gonna fight. We're gonna defund.
Foxsoul Screening Room is up next. Thank you for being on Business of Being Black.